The ground shook beneath Sergeant Olivia Graves as the air around her erupted into chaos. Explosions, deafening and relentless, shattered the once pristine streets of Earth's last capital city. Patches of burning debris scattered like confetti in a storm, twisting in the air before crashing to the ground. Above her, the sky was choked with black smoke, darkening the horizon. The war had come home. Again. But this time, it wasn't an alien fleet raining fire from the heavens. This time it was us, the last remnant of humanity's defiant will. Graves! We need to move, now! A sharp voice cut through the comms, crackling with static. Olivia's hand closed tightly around the pistol at her side, the cold metal comforting against her gloved fingers. She glanced around the corner of the collapsed building, her breath coming in ragged bursts. The streets were filled with the screams of wounded civilians and the thundering footsteps of armored soldiers. Her soldiers, their backs straight, their eyes wide with terror and resolve. The future of humanity rested on them, but more importantly, it rested on her. Move it, Sergeant! A soldier grabbed her arm, yanking her back into the narrow alleyway. His face was grim beneath the helmet, eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and determination. We can't hold them back much longer. The Calrigar have breached the gates. We're running out of time. Olivia didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She knew what came next, and she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. The stakes were too high for second guesses. The Calrigar, an alien race of ruthless conquerors, had learned too much about humanity's defensive tactics. They knew how we fought, how we strategized, and, most dangerous of all, they knew how we adapted. But they had underestimated one thing: humanity's sheer refusal to die. Get the civilians to the underground complex, Olivia barked, snapping her gaze to her team. I'll hold the line. Are you insane? Another soldier shouted, his voice trembling. We don't have enough ammo, Graves. They'll overrun us. The Calrigar. They asked if humans could fight without guns. She interrupted, her voice cold and steady, cutting through the panic. She turned back to face him, her eyes hardening like steel. Watch and learn. The soldier opened his mouth, but the words died on his lips as Olivia stepped forward, her boots hitting the concrete with purpose. She didn't need a weapon to kill. She didn't need the crutch of technology or firepower. Her body, honed through years of brutal training, would suffice. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its weapons. It was its will. She reached for the communicator on her wrist. Command, this is Sergeant Graves. I'm holding position. There's no retreat. Over. The crackling static was followed by a terse, urgent response. Graves, you're on your own. The rest of the unit's evacuating. You're in too deep. Understood. I'll make my own way out. She didn't wait for confirmation before cutting the comm link. The tension in the air around her thickened like a storm cloud about to burst. Her soldiers, who had stayed by her side through hell and back, were already on the move, some to help the civilians, others to engage the Calrigar forces. She didn't expect them to come back. That was the reality of war. But Olivia wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. The screeching sound of alien machinery drew her attention to the horizon. Dozens of Calrigar war mechs, towering in size and armed with heavy energy weapons, marched toward the city's last bastion, her position. They were methodical, calculating, but they hadn't anticipated one thing: human unpredictability. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. But she had one advantage that the Calrigar would never understand. She wasn't afraid to lose. Olivia's mind shifted into overdrive, calculating her options, the terrain, the movement of her enemies. 100 different scenarios flashed through her mind in seconds, each one culminating in one singular conclusion. It was time to show them what humanity could do when backed into a corner. She let the tension build, letting her heart pound in her chest as the first of the Calrigar mechs rounded the corner, its massive metallic limbs thundering against the ground. She could see its sensor-laden head scanning the area, its weapons primed. But it wasn't prepared for the speed with which Olivia moved. The moment the mech took another step, she darted out of the alley, her feet barely touching the ground. Her movements were fast, fluid, a blur of controlled fury. She dove to her left, slipping into a crouch, then rolled behind a pile of rubble. The Calrigar mech was just a few paces away. It was an easy target. Her arm shot out, fingers flexing. A small explosive device clicked into place on her wrist, a last-ditch measure, no need for complex weaponry. A quick detonation. The sound was deafening. The mech's torso exploded in a cloud of metal and sparks, sending the towering figure toppling to the ground in a fiery crash. A few more steps, a few more kills. Humanity's brilliance was never more apparent than in this moment. No guns, no advanced tech. Just raw, unrelenting tactics and a refusal to fall. As the dust cleared, Olivia emerged from behind the rubble, her chest heaving with exertion. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Graves, the soldier from earlier, managed, his voice now laced with awe. You really did it." She didn't respond, only nodded once. The battle was far from over, and there was no time for self-congratulation. Ahead of her, more Calrigar forces were advancing, more mechs, more infantry, more death. But for the first time in this war, she felt a flicker of hope. The Calrigar might have their power, their technology, but they had no idea what humanity was capable of when it fought with everything left inside it. And Olivia Graves was about to make sure they would never forget that. The first mech fell with an earth-shattering thud, its body crumpling into the rubble as a blinding fireball sent debris scattering across the street. Olivia didn't wait for the smoke to settle. Her hands were already reaching for the next grenade, her pulse quickening. But before she could launch it, a shriek echoed above, followed by the screech of a nearby energy turret charging up. "Incoming!" someone shouted, their voice cracking with fear. "Graves, there's no way." "Shut up and keep moving!" Olivia snapped, spinning toward the group of soldiers still with her. The small unit had managed to scatter across the street after the first explosion, but now they were exposed. "We hold the line or we all die." She barely caught a glimpse of the advancing Calrigar infantry, creatures, taller than men, covered in sleek, black armor, their multi-limbed bodies moving with deadly precision. They advanced in waves, relentless as the tide. Olivia cursed under her breath. She had hoped the mech explosion would stall them. It didn't. The Calrigar had seen worse. "Ready up!" She didn't wait for their response, instead turning on her heels and throwing a second grenade at an approaching cluster of soldiers. The blast sent them tumbling, their armor cracking under the impact. But just as quickly as the first wave fell, a new set of armored figures emerged from behind the wreckage, bigger, faster. The elite Calrigar soldiers, their exoskeletons gleaming with a near-imperceptible blue light, moved with terrifying speed. She didn't have time to reload. Without thinking, Olivia darted behind a collapsed storefront, her body crashing into the steel frame for cover. The air whistled past her ears as the Calrigar's energy rifles hummed to life, firing bolts of concentrated plasma that sizzled through the air. "Get down!" She heard someone yell, followed by the sounds of soldiers scrambling for cover. But Olivia wasn't waiting for them to react. She pushed herself up from the rubble, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her next move was instinctive. No plan. Just action. One of the Calrigar soldiers came into view, his rifle raised. She was faster. Her fist met the side of his helmet with a sickening crack. Before his body could even hit the ground, she was already reaching for his weapon, disarming him in a blur of motion. "Take cover!" Olivia shouted, snapping the plasma rifle to her shoulder. She fired a precise shot, watching the Calrigar soldier crumple into a heap, the energy blast searing through his chest. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady, the weight of the rifle feeling like nothing. The rest of her soldiers were still scrambling to keep up. She could hear them shouting, yelling for orders. But Olivia knew they were outmatched. They couldn't win this. Not with brute force. "We need to fall back," she said, voice sharp. "We can't hold this ground." There was no immediate response. They were hesitant. But then, as if they had all reached the same conclusion, they started pulling back. One by one, the remaining soldiers retreated into the alleyways, their eyes wide with fear and determination. Olivia stayed. She couldn't leave yet. Not until she had done what she needed to. Another mech appeared in the distance, bigger than the others, its frame nearly double the size of a human. Its large cannons glowed a bright blue as it locked onto her position, its targeting system scanning the area. "Graves, move!" a soldier yelled from the alley. "Now! It's too much!" But Olivia's eyes were fixed on the looming mech, her mind racing. She could hear the countdown in her head, the seconds ticking away. She had one chance. If she moved now, if she timed this right. She turned her back on the alley and sprinted into the open street, drawing the mech's attention. It fired. Olivia dove behind a concrete barrier, the blast searing the air above her, hot enough to melt metal. Her body skidded along the pavement, but her resolve didn't waver. She pushed herself up, forcing air into her lungs as the mech moved closer, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Just as the mech raised its cannon again, Olivia sprinted, faster than she had ever run. She could hear the whine of the mech's weapons charging behind her, the blinding light flickering in her peripheral vision. There wasn't much time. She launched herself forward, sliding between two demolished vehicles, rolling to her feet in an instant. Without missing a beat, she ripped a pulse grenade from her belt and hurled it toward the mech's central power core. It was a long shot. Too long. She didn't care. The grenade impacted the mech with a sharp, metallic ring. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to pause. And then, the explosion tore through the mech's chest. It crumpled under the blast, its legs buckling as its hull cracked open. Olivia didn't wait to watch it fall. She had already pivoted, running toward the next barricade. "Move!" she shouted, her voice hoarse, but her actions speaking louder than anything she could say. Her soldiers followed her lead, now regrouping, their eyes filled with both disbelief and hope. They were still alive. The mech's destruction wasn't a victory, it was a delay. A momentary stall in a war they had no hope of winning. But in that moment, it felt like a miracle. The street was eerily quiet after the explosion settled. Olivia's breathing was ragged, but she stood tall. She looked at her soldiers, their faces etched with exhaustion, fear, and, finally, respect. But there was no time to savor the moment. "We've bought ourselves minutes," Olivia muttered, her mind already shifting to the next move. "We need to get to the underground command center. Now." The words spread quickly. The urgency in her tone sparked a fire in their eyes. But just as they began to move, a low rumble filled the air. Olivia froze, her eyes darting around. The ground beneath her trembled once again, this time in a way that couldn't be explained by the Calrigar's mechs. She looked up. A massive ship was descending from the sky, a dark shadow eclipsing the sun. "Get down!" someone screamed. But Olivia didn't need to be told. She already knew what was coming. The Calrigar weren't done. The rumble of the descending ship grew louder, drowning out everything else. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she snapped her head toward the sky. The Calrigar flagship loomed overhead, its massive hull casting an ominous shadow over the city. The sheer size of it made the air feel thick with dread. "We need cover!" she shouted, but the words felt hollow in her throat. There was nowhere left to hide. The Calrigar had found them, and now, they were coming for everything. The soldiers around her scattered, seeking shelter behind ruined vehicles and collapsed structures. The ground trembled again, this time with the pounding steps of the ground forces, now fully mobilized and advancing from all sides. The sound of their boots hitting the shattered earth sent a chill down Olivia's spine. It was no longer just an attack, it was an invasion. "Move!" Olivia barked, tearing her gaze away from the ship. Her fingers clenched around the plasma rifle she'd stolen from the fallen Calrigar soldier. She would need more than just firepower to survive this. Her soldiers were disorganized, panic creeping into their movements as they tried to regroup. The Calrigar's heavy artillery had taken its toll. Only a handful of them were still standing. It was clear now that this wasn't a battle they were going to win. They had survived long enough to make a statement, but survival was running out. Olivia's mind raced. There was one last play, one shot at escaping this nightmare. "Focus!" she yelled, her voice breaking through the chaos. "We hold until the evac team arrives. We hold, or we die here." But as she scanned the wreckage and the soldiers' faces, she knew it wasn't that simple. The Calrigar weren't like any enemy they had fought before. They didn't just conquer, they crushed. And now, they had their sights set on Earth. A flash of movement caught her eye. She turned just in time to see a figure dart between the ruins, moving faster than humanly possible. The Calrigar elite, those damn armored soldiers. It was no longer a war of attrition. This was the moment where everything changed. Without hesitation, Olivia rushed toward them, her pulse rifle aimed and ready. She was done waiting for orders, done waiting for help. It was time to take the fight to them. If they were going to die, she would make damn sure it wasn't without a fight. The first Calrigar soldier came into view, his body clad in sleek, black exoskeleton armor. His eyes, black and unfathomable, locked onto hers. There was no fear in his expression. Just cold calculation. He raised his rifle to fire. But Olivia was faster. She dropped to the ground in a roll, narrowly avoiding the searing beam of plasma that would have pierced her skull. She didn't wait. Rolling to her feet, she fired. The blast hit the soldier square in the chest, sending him crashing backward into a pile of rubble. She didn't stop to watch him fall. She was already targeting the next one. The firefight was brutal, fast, and relentless. The Calrigar advanced like a tidal wave, but Olivia was the rock in the middle of it all. She ducked and weaved, firing with deadly precision. A shot to the chest, a shot to the leg, and another soldier went down. Her hands were slick with sweat, her muscles screaming from exhaustion, but she didn't stop. "Not yet. We're not going to make it," one of the soldiers muttered, his voice trembling as he fired desperately at the advancing enemy. "We can't." "Shut up!" Olivia snapped. "You keep fighting or you die right here. You want to let them win?" She gestured toward the sky, where the looming ship cast an ever-darkening shadow over them. "If you want to die, go ahead. But we're not going down like this." The soldier's eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded, his hands steadying on his rifle. He fired again. Olivia turned to see another wave of Calrigar infantry surging forward. There was no time left for hesitation. The evac team wouldn't make it in time. The ship above them would ensure that. She was the only chance these men and women had left. And then, in the corner of her eye, she saw it. A small, flickering red light, almost too faint to notice. The escape shuttle, hidden just around the corner of a collapsed building. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't much, barely enough fuel to make it off the ground, but it was enough for one last shot. "We're pulling back!" Olivia shouted, not even waiting for them to respond. She turned and ran, firing over her shoulder, picking off the remaining Calrigar soldiers in her path. Her boots hit the cracked pavement, the sound of her own breathing deafening in her ears as she sprinted toward the shuttle. "Graves, wait!" one of the soldiers shouted. The others, "Move!" Olivia didn't look back. She was done waiting. She reached the shuttle in seconds, sliding to a halt just as the first wave of plasma fire streaked past her. Her hands slammed against the hatch, the controls glowing bright in the dim light. The shuttle was still intact, barely. Come on, Olivia muttered, sweat running down her face. The hatch slid open with a groan, and she ducked inside, instantly beginning the pre-launch sequence. The hatch slammed shut, sealing them inside. She punched in the last code, her eyes glued to the controls. But as the shuttle roared to life, something on the screen caught her attention. A countdown. Her stomach dropped. "We're not going to make it," one soldier said, his voice hollow. "There's no fuel." "We make it," Olivia said, her voice low but filled with cold resolve. She gripped the controls, steering the shuttle toward the sky, ignoring the fire from the ground below. They were out of time, out of options, but she wasn't done yet. The shuttle lurched forward, shaking violently as it broke through the atmosphere. Outside, the Calrigar ship loomed like a death sentence, but Olivia's eyes were focused forward. Her mind was already racing toward the next move. They would survive. They had to. A distant explosion rocked the shuttle, a wave of heat splashing against the hull. She glanced at the soldiers beside her. They were alive, for now. But humanity had only just begun to fight. "We're not done," she said, her voice steady. "This is just the beginning."